Welcome to the June 4th OpenZFS production user call. We have Andrew, Jan, Mark, Gibran, Steve, Archie, and myself, Michael. I have a few quick announcements here. BSDCan is right around the corner. I hope to see some of you there. It's not too late to register or attend. Granted, it's in a faraway place for some, but it's shaping up to be a rather exciting event. And the 2025 OpenZFS User and Developer Summit was officially announced yesterday, and I produced a draft logo at early morning. Uh, People have thought, wait a minute, is that a text bubble, a call out, a what? I will work on making this little gondola looking thing more obvious insofar as Portland has the aerial tram, and I'm trying to capture that as something that happens to be between downtown and the venue. So I will keep at it. And one quick comment about me being tied up with BSDCan, the summit, etc. I find that I'm doing a lot more volunteering than work at the very moment, which is concerning. So if you or your employer or anyone is able to help these efforts financially, hey, there's bsdfund.org, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I hate having to shill, but it's consuming. We briefly talked about Andrew's beehive observation. So planting a seed for tomorrow, he found that when configuring under Lumos two 16-core sockets, the VNC mouse disappeared and keyboard, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'll throw in VNC to clarify. So if someone has an option to test those, please do, be it on Lumos and or FreeBSD. That is fascinating, and maybe it does tip over I don't know, a internal buffer, and it takes it out. So that's you might be finding the tip of the iceberg there. So directly on topic, Steve, you are using a light ERP system, and you are hoping to either use cloning as a light clone or a new feature. Now, do I recall you having the legacy app with lots and lots of little files that incorporate or entangle metadata with data, and it's been a little frustrating to work with? Is that him?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
I have, in this situation, there's probably 3, 4, 500 files in the data set. And so in this project, the functionality writes to these files, and they're not necessarily small. Some of them are, but they can be as much as 4 or 5 gigs. The the thing, the cool thing about ZFS is it's actually a useful tool for supporting legacy applications, especially in my case, situations where I'm um, assisting the team with migrating to newer stacks. And in this case, we have some code that we do not want to touch. But the code is weak in that it doesn't do things in a transactional way. Now, functionally, it's pretty solid. Like a lot of people are using this and don't have a reason to complain. But part of the migration effort requires this sort of transactional thing to now be better. So what I'd like to do is sort of shim transaction functionality at the file system layer. And I could do this right now with ZFS clone, except that I suspect that that's approach is going to be too heavy. So like I might hit a system in the middle of the day and notice, oh, if I did this, I would notice, wow, I've got 400 clones floating around. And I just am not sure that that's a production
Well,
scenario I want to see.
maybe
Well,
not clones, but snapshots.
Well, I
Um,
do need to write to the thing while it's in progress. Like I
Which
need to.
database are you using? If I can interrupt you.
Is it actually a
So it's
database?
no, it's not a database. It's these are files that's a proprietary format, and they have like a B tree type structure.
Okay, so it's kind of like using the old B tree, Berkeley DB or whatever.
Yeah, like I think
Does it
the
have a kind of backup mode similar to what SQLite has, where you can put it in a mode where it won't overwrite anything, but only append to the file?
uh
Some kind of backup functionality at the database level,
so
so that you can
definitely
take a backup with
yeah,
something like
definitely
tar
there's
or
no feature like that in this platform that I would trust. Like I would actually yeah, I wouldn't trust like there is a rollback functionality, but in practice I've found that it corrupts or crashes servers. And so I'm not willing to do that. Plus, part of it is
here's
we're
a
yeah, go ahead.
dirty idea what you may be able to do. You take a ZFS snapshot and then you use the copy file range system call to populate a new file out of the snapshot.
Yeah, that's an option.
If you this should give you basically a copy on write file, which is atomically consistent, and then you dispose of the snapshot.
Okay, in that scenario, let's say that the file is 4 gigs.
Yep.
And I do that, and then the user writes 4K into that file somewhere. Am I doing a
Then it's
block update
4K
or
plus a bit of metadata on disk. But the block cloning gets expanded by replication. So if you take send that somewhere, the block cloning efficiency is lost, and you would have to write some kind of helper to punch it back in, which would mean that you can't really replicate on top of it anymore, which is really annoying. That block cloning isn't preserved across replication because it kind of happens underneath it.
And Steve, going through the minutes, no, that's the application I was thinking of. It's a legacy stack, and you were experimenting with Lua-based snapshotting and other acrobatics. So let's see. Were you successful? I'm using the word success here. It sounds like you did have some degree of success in working around it, and this is the next
well,
level of the
yeah, so
question.
that's actually uh
Okay.
a different technique on the same project that is successful, like it is working fine. But all of these things are like temporary towards migrating a system.
Okay.
So I'm in a different situation, and I need a different approach that isn't this one.
So is the destination solution in place already? Like it's up and running and you're doing a one-time migration, or this takes months, or what's that going to look like for the rest of us?
It depends on like um, so there's probably no predictable timeline. So I think the way that the migration will occur is on vertical slices of functionality.
Okay.
And so like this particular section, or there may be several sections in this project that need to be kind of shimmed up or shored up, so to speak. They might be kind of the first to disappear and get moved, but it's difficult to say.
Hmm.
What was the system call that was mentioned?
You know what?
Copy file range with underscores.
I'll put that
It
in.
requires you to have OpenZFS 2.2 or newer, and in FreeBSD 14.2, this functionality is still behind a chicken bit, so you have to set a sysctl to enable it because it's so new. But I think 15 it will become on active by default. And the other point is, given that it's only 5 gigabytes times 500 files, maybe it would be fine if you know the B tree block size and you can match that with your ZFS record size to enable dedup for only those data sets. And then basically you would enable dedup and then you copy the stuff in and rely on dedup because the dedup table required to track that amount of data is probably acceptable on a big system. And as long as you don't enable dedup anywhere else, the other data sets don't have to be sized for, the host doesn't have to be sized for dedup everything. So the dedup performance and memory costs have gone down over time. And memory has become a lot more affordable. And especially with all flash systems, the ratio of DRAM to disk space is normally a lot more appealing to dedup rather than 20 terabyte SATA spinning disks and DRAM sizes from a decade ago.
So yeah, dedupe has definitely seen improvements, but copy file range is sort of a fascinating new variation on it. But keep in mind its benefits are lost on send.
It uses its own on-disk representation, which is why it's lower overhead. But unlike file system level dedup, it relies on user space telling the kernel the candidate to deduplicate. Basically, you tell the kernel with a system call, here are two normal files. This many bytes at these offsets in these files should become identical. And then the kernel can decide whether to just copy it, or if it's different types of file systems, maybe even refuse to copy it, then you have to do a normal CP block level copy. Or if it's ZFS, it can be smart about it and use block cloning so that you can, even on spinning disks, suddenly take a snapshot of your database in a few milliseconds. There have been bug reports where people said, this is impossible, ZFS is losing data because I can't have copied with CP my 300 gigabyte Postgres database in under a second. Because it's just that ridiculously fast if you compare it to normal deep copying. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to read a little bit about copy file range. That
Copy
might...
file range is only the way you access this from user space. The feature is called bclone for block cloning.
So I was reading about like CP reflink.
That's
is that the
what
same
it's
thing?
called in Linux CP. On FreeBSD, it's on by default in CP. So starting with FreeBSD, I think 14.2, CP install and cat will always try to use copy file range with an infinite size. And if that doesn't work, they fall back to the usual strategy of copying in chunks.
Let's say my file is not like, let's say I'm not super concerned with consistency, which I might be, but pretend for a minute.
Yeah, then
and
you
so
could just
let's
CP
avoid
it.
Yeah, so avoid the snapshot, do a CP, and you say I would get an instant copy because of the block table, right? Block reference
You
table.
would get a copy on write file, basically.
Yes. Now, when the user writes a 4K section into that file because they did some update, is it
Then
going
you
to have
will
to copy the whole file, or is it just a single block that gets modified?
The block and the metadata required to track where this block is allocated from. So you have some
Okay.
write amplification. If your block size is, let's say, the default of 128 kilobytes, Then if you have a 4K block in your B-tree file change,
Yeah.
it will be aligned to a ZFS block. You could use ZDB to find out the exact block size for each file, because if a file is slowly written, it may start out with a smaller block size. If you know that
Gotcha.
the file system is only used for this format of file, it's tempting to match your record size to your ZFS record size. So if you know that
Right.
your, let's say, database has, I don't know, 32K blocks, then you could set the record size to 32K. But especially if it's weight Z, that's not that good of an idea, because you will end up with losing capacity to alignment and so on. If you leave the default of 128K, it's kind of an acceptable trade-off between write amplification and on-disk efficiency and sequential throughput. But especially if your B tree is sorted data, it may be very tempting to instead increase the record size a lot, up to, let's say, a megabyte, and then let the transparent LZIP4 compression work for you, because things like database indices can often be compressed by a factor of 5, because it's sorted data with a bit of structure in between, which is very easily compressible. And because the arc is mostly compressed, except for a very hot part of the arc and a bit of memory map files, this means that now your resident working set can be 4 or 5 times as large, which can really help with performance, because suddenly stuff became a in-memory database, effectively, at least for reads.
Okay.
I've seen that with Postgres. But it depends on your workload if this is a good trade-off. It definitely increases write amplification, but it gives you a lot better read performance potentially, because decompressing the relevant piece of 1 megabyte in memory is so much faster than going to any kind of disk other than maybe an NVDIMM. Yeah.
So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to run some tests on this and get back to you guys next week.
So while you have us, quick question, I dropped them in there. So if you've got 500 files on a, let's just say in a day, do 10% change, do 90% change? What's the churn on all that?
I'm going to say 25%.
Okay. And then are they all in one massive directory, or could you break it out into data sets and have a different record size on each and different handling and do deduplication and you name it?
We probably should have structured, more data sets in order down to like different sections.
Well,
right now it's all in one data set.
But are there directories within it that could be data sets? Is more accurate?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
there
well, that's
are.
good.
Like,
okay.
Yeah. So like currently the pure data is all I'm after, but I don't have a way to separate it out without, getting back to our DevOps team and saying, hey, you need to create a lot of child data sets.
I want to jump in right here. I would really push for trying to clone method first before doing any of this. 500 clones should be doable. At least it needs to be tested. They are quick, they are fast, and they can you should be able to handle a lot, even at that size.
They still can.
It would be
just
easier.
Annoying in ZFS list -r.
Yes, there will be some annoyance, but it is what it can do, and it would be fairly cheap.
Okay, and I was wondering, like, sometimes I run into situations with the snapshots where it's like I feel like I accidentally mount a whole bunch of them, and I'm wondering if that might be a thing too with the clones. And like, is there a potential mounting overhead to any of this on Linux?
Mounting file systems is not the cheapest operation, but you do it once and then they stay mounted for a long time. So don't worry about it unless you measure that this is the bottleneck. Normally, it's only kind of annoying that you do it and then because the snapshots reference old cold data, especially on a hybrid or pure spinning disk pool, it may be a bit slow to find all the metadata to mount them. But once this is in memory, it's totally fine. It doesn't really impact the system. It's only the code doing the mounting, which is delayed. And yeah, the
Is
per
there really
mount
a
cost is
difference
not that high.
Is there a difference between mounting and just creating a bunch of data sets then?
You can create a data set without mounting it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know
Yeah.
that on FreeBSD, for example, when mounting a file system, the kernel loops over all processes to look into their file descriptor tables, and if anyone has the mount point directly about to be mounted, uh, as a directory open, kind of the vnode is for the file is redirected from the directory to be overmounted to the new mount point. And yeah, that means that it kind of has to loop over all processes and then take a lock on the file descriptor table for a process. But it's sequential per mount, yes, but it is what it is. It works. Don't worry about it until you have to.
Yeah.
500 is not that much for ZFS. It's just annoying when you have to search for it on the terminal.
Yes, it does make DF a little ugly.
Although I have another naughty idea what you could do. Do you have multiple processes accessing those files, or do you know exactly which process uses which file? Do you have a one-to-one mapping between, or a one-to-many between process and B-tree files? Because
I'm going to say
so,
process, one process probably.
yeah,
Yes,
because in
one
that
process.
case, you may be able to do the following. You would pause the process by sending it a sig pause, a sig stop, pause the process, do the copy file range, and then resume the process with a sig count. Similar to what you would in a shell when you pause a background job. You background pause the process, you take the now consistent snapshot because if a process is paused, it can't do any I/O. So you do not get the blurry photograph problem where you have a database file which is changing while you do a copy file range. And because of how fast it is, you won't really notice because yeah, you can do it in milliseconds.
I feel like the proprietary application would cough at that.
Why? It
Because
doesn't know. How?
while it might not know, it might get a little unhappy with inconsistent times, if nothing else. They have usually put things in these to not let you do those sorts of fun stuff.
It would have to put some kind of DRM in to notice.
Well, they put DRM in tractors, so I don't know why they won't put DRM in there.
I said it was a naughty idea. How you could get the consistent copy of the file without application or file system support by hacking around and exploiting the fact that you have a single writer process you can pause. I didn't say it was a clean approach.
I have a question. Is the process actually running on the same box, or is the box simply for storage?
It's all running on the same box.
It's all running on the same box. Okay. So then that would work.
Could the process be restarted?
No.
Okay.
I assumed if it was some kind of server process, you can't just stop it to take the backup and resume without people yelling at you because some application writer believes in the cult of the eternal TCP connection.
It is possible that I could, like, I don't want to modify code, but I could actually lock the file for a small slice of time from
You
inside
can't
the app.
really unless the application ever releases the lock and acquires an exclusive lock on it because POSIX file locking is advisory, not mandatory.
I mean,
so you can
the lock that I'm talking about is it's an inside the proprietary system, like it's their locking. So that would prevent writes happening while I'm potentially doing a copy file range.
If you have this kind of functionality,
go ahead.
You can do it.
So I do think that the cloning would be more straightforward. I am worried about like an admin jumping on the machine and sort of being very surprised by all this cruft that's being generated. So I'll probably have to do a little testing around both approaches and see what's palatable.
So if you do have just hold on. If you do have snapshots, there is the specific snapshot directory you can copy out of too.
And if that copy can, the thing I'm trying to avoid is doing this on a 4 gig file and writing a 4K block and causing writing a 4K block and then causing a 4 gig copy to happen in some way. So if like the snapshot,
Clone would get around that. You'd only update what your record size was.
So back to your snapshot thing. So if I did a snapshot and copied out of the snapshot,
then you would get the you get the FAT file.
Unless you do it with block cloning.
Yes.
If you take a snapshot and then create a clone out of that snapshot, anything you change inside the clone is changed with copy and write semantics. So as you change a block in the file, that block changes. The other blocks still reference the original copy of the data on disk. The downside of using clones is that you cannot rebase them. So you cannot really remove the dependency on the old data or take your diff and go somewhere else within ZFS. You can write some kind of user space tool to do that, but it would be specific to your application.
Right. I think what I would force the developers to do is, so the user is finished editing and they want to commit, the developer has to capture what changed and write it back to the original. So I would say that's on them if I were to go this route.
It's a problem that your file format has no transaction and consistency support at all right now? Or is it about point-in-time recovery? I'm still not really clear what you're trying to do.
I think it is fundamentally the first statement.
So right now it's just a YOLO file format where you have a B tree, and if it corrupts, your data is gone?
Yes. In practice, that never happens, but yes.
Oof.
Vendors.
Well, this is a legacy app. It'll
And
probably be around longer than I am, but
Right.
do you
That's the
have
funny thing about it.
one single-digit gigabyte file per tenant, or do you have one big application server serving out of all of these files?
so we are. Let's see. So this is a data set per tenant.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've got some stuff to kick around. I think I can.
We look
maybe
forward to
get
your
a little
executive
more
summary on what you find.
So snapshots
Listen-
will definitely give you point-in-time recovery for whatever is in the file, but the file format is so fragile that it's not safely resumable if you have the atomicity which CFS gives you, which means that you can't even deal with having just total system calls, but maybe some change requires multiple system calls to happen as one transaction. And if you get any cut in between multiple system calls, that if that corrupts your file system, you're kind of in living dangerous land.
So I don't think that's so. The reason I would be taking a snapshot or trying to do this light copy is so that the user can work through their process to the point where they're ready to commit. Again, I think the developer would have to say, "Oh, okay, you're ready to commit that data," and they would summarize the data. And at that point, we would throw away the copy completely, and we would write back to the original file.
So what you can do is you can promote a clone so that instead of the clone having a dependency on the origin snapshot, it's the snapshot which has the dependency. Basically, you move the history to belong to the clone, kind of. So that
Right, but I would be afraid, I would be afraid of like concurrency at that point, because I don't know that there's not another user doing the same thing.
Okay, in that case you need a lock.
File. Yep.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like you're trying to use CFS to add transactions around your whole application. Does the application have any kind of exchange format for you to dump the database into a text file or something, or to have some kind of export with change or something?
No. Oh. Yeah, this is we're working with old school stuff right here.
Yeah. How often do you want to take those snapshots or those clones?
I don't know. Like, it would depend on how many spots in the system need this treatment. I would say on a very healthy system, like, it could be several hundred a day.
So every minute, every 15
5 minutes or
minutes.
so, that sounds like
Yeah.
it or something.
Okay.
Because 24 hours a day times 4, 50 minutes, 24 times 4 is kind of almost 100. So yeah.
So other than the disk space it's going to cost you, it should be fine.
And it only costs you disk space if you have lots of changes.
And you don't clean up.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long do you want to keep the clones? Well, if it's snapshots, then you could specify how long you want to keep them. But with clones, I'm not sure you could do the same thing because you depend on the source of the data.
You can promote them if you basically you try to delete it, and if ZFS destroy on the snapshot tells you no, you can't do that because there's a clone depending on this in the error message, you can pass that out. These days, ZFS may even be able to give you a JSON error message, which is easier to handle. And then you could extract the depending clone name out of that and do a ZFS promote. And after the promote, you can delete the snapshot.
Okay. So yeah, depending on how long you need to keep it.
I would say most of these would be like if the user's actually is sitting down and actually doing their thing quickly, probably 5 minutes. Like from the time when we create the snapshot to the time when we can destroy it is probably 5 minutes on average.
Okay, so we're not keeping it for long.
Case
In
it's
theory,
all raw
right there.
data, don't worry about it.
And then the
Performance will be
thing,
fine.
yeah, the thing that I'm trying to account for is a user may they may do something to abandon the process. That's the thing that matters to me. And so like by having it in a kind of a sandbox, which is what the snapshot / clone provides, I don't care if they abandon it. I can just clean it up later. I notice that it's 15 minutes old or something and just throw it away, or it doesn't have an open reference or something.
That should all be doable. Nothing
so
you've said doesn't, I'm sorry, everything you've said sounds like snapshots and clones will easily handle what you need.
Yeah, you also don't have a big cost for data because you're not keeping them for that long.
And if it's only a few kilobytes here and there that change in the database, it's tiny. The diffs, if you look at it, will not matter on a modern system.
Yeah, so I think the whole discussion comes down to I came into this thinking I could probably use clones for this and it'll be fine, but I'm worried about using clones for it. And what I'm hearing is you shouldn't be worried. Just try that, see what happens.
Yes. On ZFS, that has no problem. In other file systems, proprietary, blah, 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 that could cause really issues. ZFS has absolutely no problem doing that. I mean, I probably have at least, I know, a small 2,000 snapshots on my system, and I don't even notice them. They're not.
Do a incremental ZFS send between the relevant snapshots with verbose enabled, and you will see that it's probably tiny. It will tell you how much changed. So if you make it verbose, and you can just redirect the replication stream to dev null if you really want to run it and measure how long it takes to produce the output. Should be fairly cheap.
Are these snapshots trying to leave the box?
Just if you want to know how large they are and how much time it takes to collect the diff inside ZFS.
Why doesn't ZFS snapshot list do that?
Oh, you can have it, but there's some rounding overhead, and the diff only tells you the size. It doesn't actually enumerate it and collect the blocks which changed.
Okay.
If you want to know basically how much time it would take to go over all the blocks which change and find them, that's what the replication stream to DevNull gives you with it. Because it actually reads the blocks in and writes them to the output.
Okay, but
It's
in
kind
general,
of the worst
that
case
should,
overhead test.
yeah, but it should be less, at least as we hear it, it should be less than 5 megs, really less than a meg.
If it's depends on the file format, how noisy it is. If there are lots of indices split over, maybe it is 10 megs or 20 or whatever, but you're only going to find that out by running the experiment.
Also, if you're cleaning up a bunch, the amounts shouldn't matter as much.
and the snapshots are only mounted on demand as you access them. So if you don't go into the snapshot directories, then they're not auto-mounted. So if you are in the .zfs directory there in the snapshot directory, that's fine. If you then do an ls star, then you mount them all. But if you just do an ls on the snapshot directory, you're not mounting them. Only once you look inside the snapshot mount point directories for what they contain do they get mounted on demand. On FreeBSD, you can run the mount-v command to see which snapshots are mounted because normally they're hidden in the mount output. I don't know if Linux has a verbose flag to the mount command to show this, or even if it's maybe always shown. I don't use ZFS on Linux. But read the Linux mount command main page for more details.
I have a tamer question, but
Sure.
before I jump into that, I'll see if
Oh.
anybody else has a topic.
Oh, so unrelated to that?
Yeah, not related. Yep.
Oh, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
So I have an old system that I have some ZFS stuff running on, and I use NFS to kind of share that to my dev machines. And this is pretty old gear, like 1 gigabit type stuff. And I just kind of suspect that things could be better. And I'm wondering, like,
performance,
space?
Yeah,
like so like what I would like to
development.
do is be using the NFS share more. But sometimes, like, I'll open an editor and I get laggy, stuff going on, etc.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah,
the problem with NFS, especially NFS version 3, is that eventually a write, unless it wins the race to disk, becomes a sync write. So NFS is quite sync write heavy because you basically send the data and then the client guesstimates how much later to send a commit.
but I think I'm on 4. Is 4 recent?
Similar-ish behavior, just not as bad, I think.
Okay.
So this means that all the writes potentially go through the ZFS intent block, and if you have spinning disks, that's probably your bottleneck. Basically, the commit costs you a fsync, which means you have to write to the intent log in a synchronous way and then flush a write buffer.
Yeah, no spinning disks. No
All
spinning
flash?
disks.
Oh, interesting. So a
Oh,
slog
all
wouldn't
flash.
help you. Interesting.
Are you sure it's V4 on both sides?
I would have to confirm. I did check, and I believe it is.
Okay, because I've had issues with V3 and V4 talking and being slow on Proxmox over NFS.
Interop. And this is on real hardware, not virtualized?
Yes. I'll say real hardware. But it is possible that I'm in a VM when I'm experiencing the lag, but I'll have to confirm that.
Our questions, do you have any switches with Ethernet flow control on? Because that can cause really nasty back pressure behavior, where if you have a flow control congestion event on one switch port, it kind of has to stop all other switch ports down, which could overrun that queue if they contain switches. So kind of that you get this pumping behavior in your network.
So I think what I'm hearing is, even on 1 gigabit, if I do the right things, this should be working okay.
Well, you
There
should,
NFS
should,
if running
should
an
be
editor, you
usable,
should be fine. That's been done for decades.
Okay.
so you
at
got to make,
least, especially if you're opening an editor, that shouldn't take long.
you need to make sure your versions are correct. You might have to adjust some window sizing as well, as at least
Yeah.
what I've done.
Read ahead, maybe multiple connections. But one of the problems with gigabit Ethernet is basically how slow it is compared to everything else if you have Flash and modern-ish systems. It's easy to overload a 1 gig pipe, especially when you have 10 gig nodes somewhere in your network. And then you will actually see dropped frames in TCP weak transmits.
Is 10 gig equipment like insanely pricey?
No.
No,
Oh, not
No,
anymore.
I have 10 gig at home.
10 gig equipment is affordable if you, especially if you use it for home production and business users. Or the question is really, does it still make sense to buy 10 gig?
I mean, yeah,
Don't you
if
want
you're
to go to
buying,
25, 40, whatever?
yeah. If you want to get expensive, you're looking at 25, 40, 100 gig, somewhere in that
100
range.
gig is where you want. The problem is the affordable second market 25, 40 gig equipment and so on is quite loud and power hungry. Even 100 gig becomes available nowadays, but it's going to be loud and hot.
Yeah.
And
Save it
you
for the
basically
networking
have to
call.
wire everything with fiber, which needs less space in your if you have already a perfectly sized hole. So one armored fiber is a lot thinner than a Cat6 cable.
Not wrong. Okay, save it for the networking call.
Did I take up the whole hour? It's
Well
No.
played, well played. So then I'll throw in one
Wow.
that got interrupted in a recent call. Thank you, Steve, for that. We look forward to your report on what you find, especially
Thanks,
if there's
everyone.
things you can document about the actual, well, you need not name an application, but maybe, blog about the data you looked at and what its quirks are and what the resolution was. So, you've come to the right
Come
place.
on, name and shame if you can.
Well, there's that. Once you're off the platform, name and shame the hell out of it. So anyway.
Well, not the official recording. You gotta be nice to visitors.
Okay, so this was cut off, I think, a week or two ago, and I don't think we recorded, so I wanted to share it, and I know, Andrew, you had some interest in it. I confess I had never heard of the slash at receive syntax, and it's, in my book, somewhat unZFS-y. I mean, I see how at receive could be confused as a snapshot name, and you probably can have a snapshot at receive, but then there's a slash in front of it, which is typically not used in snapshot terminology and syntax. So I was wondering
The
how,
slash
yes, Jan,
is not used at the end of the dataset name. That's just not a valid name. It's a special kind of thing.
it's a special kind of thing. Exactly. So I wanted to know how a large transfer over the WAN was going. And Rob Norris, who's just kind and brilliant, is like, oh yeah, just use slash at receive. And so I did some searching, and there were like
Slash percent receive.
yeah, but yes, thank you. Slash percent receive. There are like 4 responses on the internet mentioning it, so it's a rather unknown thing in the broader documentation. I don't know if it's anywhere in the official documentation, but to make a long story short, when you are sending, say, incrementally between Monday and Tuesday, Tuesday is landing as slash percent receive until it completes, and then it gets renamed Tuesday. And furthermore, it's temporarily a clone, I guess, of Monday until complete. So that's what I learned. It is something I've wanted to answer for probably a decade. I guess you learn something about ZFS all the freaking time, or at least I do, because I don't know everything. Uh, has anyone, does anyone know that present? Have you heard of that? Because you should have told me years ago.
Yeah, I've actually used that
Awesome, Gibran.
cloning big data sets. I think the data set was something like 20 terabytes or something.
Yeah. And you say when cloning as opposed to just a normal send?
Oh, well, I mean, the snapshotting, sorry.
Oh, okay,
Sorry,
fine.
it's very late where I am.
No, no worries at
It's
all.
been a long day.
No worries. So, well, you get a point for having seen it because I've been wanting to answer that question because, yeah, you can track the used before the send and during it, but that's like not handy. But then suddenly you can just get all properties on the /% receive snapshot, which is not quite a snapshot because it's a thing.
So I just
Yes.
found the following paragraph
Oh,
in the
yes.
OpenZFS Developer Summit from 2021,
Ooh, yes, please.
notes in the OpenZFS wiki.
Great.
It reads, ZFS receive first receives the stream into a temporary clone %receive. After stream receive completes, the temp clone and live dataset are atomically swapped to change the live dataset contents to the received version.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you for finding that. I could only find some forum posts and other goodies. Oh, and arguably this should be /@receive because if I immediately type in % in place of at as if it were a range operation, and it's like, nope, not found. I'm like, what do you mean? Someone just proudly told me that's the syntax. I will actually fix this here. Anyway, that I learned, super useful. Thank you, ZFS. Speaking of Summit, and thank you for that perfect segue on. While Steve was going through his legacy application, I reached over to another machine and worked on the logo with two variations. So raising the gondola to not look like a call out /thought bubble /whatever. I made it both furthermore on the Z and larger and on the Z. So I'm curious if you as a panel have any feedback on these variations?
Could we try putting it on the other side, the dots, to not cover them up?
Other side in what regard? Like further over the edge?
Further upper right. Because right now it's covering up a couple of the dots, and those dots are important.
The small dots or the big dots?
This big dots are being covered right now.
Okay, got it. Noted. Cool.
Just worth a shot.
And I recall
Yeah,
there
but
being
it
a
would,
specific meaning of the number
I
of
have a rolling
dots.
gear.
The truck would go off the left, and I did work it back, but points taken, points taken. And
I like it on the left. I mean, I like the one on the left more than the one on the right.
okay.
I like the smaller car in the
Consumed in it, gobbled up.
yeah.
Okay.
I wonder
I
what
also
would happen if you put a
prefer the smaller
white,
car myself.
if you keep the this left one with a smaller car, but put a white outline around the car so that it isn't just a negative.
Ah, yes.
Just put a thin white outline in
Correct.
the
That now
same
works
spacing as you
insofar as
have the
it's got
windows
the
here,
background. Yes. Okay,
so
well,
that it
beautiful feedback. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because I'm assuming you want to keep it white and turquoise or whatever that color is called.
Yes, something like that.
Mhm.
Okay, points taken.
What?
And more to the point, topics. It's the run-up has begun insofar as libzfs and Jan, we have you to thank and blame for elevating this. Rob kindly took a moment to look at the issue and produced a very thoughtful write-up. I'll drop that in the chat.
Yes.
So let's see, proof on the right. Okay. I do not know if they have a release planned for right around the summit like last year, but if there is a release coming up, and there always is, if Jan, as a consumer, if you feel there's an actionable cleanup that would make your life as a libzfs consumer easier, well, let's get that conversation going or continue or sped up.
Trying to write an application against libzfs and libzfs core, I found that yes, the API could be nicer, but the main limitation for me isn't that the API isn't the nicest one to use, but that the channel program feature set is lacking a few vital API calls from inside the channel program, which force me to design the application in a lot more annoying way, because I can create snapshots within a sync in a channel program, but I cannot create clones or datasets. I do not need the datasets and clones to be mounted. It's okay if I then get the list of file systems I have to mount. That's easy for my code to handle. But if I could just run some channel program to find out which basically empty file systems I need, as the kind of think of it as Docker volumes, or pre-built clones of something, and yeah, so I would have to be able to destroy the data sets, which is already possible, and then clone or create new ones according to a specification. I can compute everything I want to change within a read-only channel program, but then I have to output the the array of changes to be performed on the system instead of being able to do them within the channel program. What would be so powerful about doing it inside the channel program is because they happen within a transaction, it would actually be atomic. So that I wouldn't have to be able to make it idempotent and clean up from partial changes anymore. So all of these recovery paths wouldn't be needed because it's either the transaction went through or it didn't. Yeah, I can test with my lab machine, because I don't think this complete audience has seen what I've been doing.
So your focus would be on adding cloning and new dataset creation to channel programs, if I understand you correctly.
That would be more important to me than rewriting the API. Rewriting the API is cleaning it up and untangling the code between the ZFS commands and libzfs, because right now there's a bit of code in libzfs which should go in the commands, and I'm afraid also in the other way around. Or making libzfs core on its own more useful and keeping a cleaner split between the feature set. All of that would be nice. But if we could get the headers installed on FreeBSD by default, all of them you need to build against it, in such a way that you do not pollute your C header namespace with basically all the Solaris portability craft needed to build the ZFS commands, but only the minimum set of types needed to call the functions, because all of these functions basically expect you to call a create function to create something on the heap and then use a pointer to that. And in the end, then you get primitive types out, which you get a char pointer or a 64-bit integer or something like that out, which doesn't require you to have all of the stuff I found a way to build against it. But if we have the headers available in FreeBSD, thanks to the CDDL, which is not viral across file boundaries, and you only have to change your you only have to share your changes if you actually have changes. It's not like the GPL or even worse, the AGPL, which kind of infects your whole application if you link against it, especially if you have headers to build against. And there is no magic stuff in the headers. It's a few type defs. And struct definitions and the function signatures. It's nothing which would be a problem if we have the rights to the code to make it available, or to explicitly kind of fight the fight against CDDL to say, hey, unless you change these files, it's totally fine to build and link against this. This is intentionally allowed by the license. Read the license.
Cool. So we don't have
Don't
licensing
follow
issues, right?
some GPL GNU FAT brought up by uninformed parties who want this to be the case, but haven't bothered to read and understand the license text.
I did not propose a licensing analysis at the summit, but yes, I'm glad we are
No.
covered
You
there,
don't
which
have
is
to.
good.
I'm pretty sure you will find unanimous agreement as to what the
Great.
license says
Fantastic.
among ZFS developers on this. The
So,
problem is that FreeBSD, through just an oversight, does not install all the headers needed because they're hidden in the sys config OpenZFS directory and do not get installed.
where should they go on, say, hypothetically FreeBSD 15?
User include sys something, or user include ZFS.
User include ZFS.
Yeah. But because of the license, as a workaround, you can just copy the headers out of the OpenZFS release into your application, into your open config, which I've done. It works. It's explicitly allowed by the license, but it's a bit messy. It would be nice if we had them as a system header, which was just available without having to have the base system sources checked out, so that it's easy to build a port which calls into libzfs. It's fine if it's not a very stable ABI and API, because it's in practice a pretty stable backward compatible ABI, so there will not be that frequent breakage. And yeah, at worst you have to track that, or maybe statically build against it because the system call ABI is even more stable. Sure, and internally backward compatible, except for a few corner cases which wouldn't be relevant to most applications. Yeah. I'm telling the nvlist stuff. Yeah, that would all be nice to have.
I recall that being an issue. Can you summarize where we're at and what we'd like to see?
Some parts of the libzfs or the libzfs core API use the nv library from Solaris, because that's where ZFS was developed, not the libnv from FreeBSD, which is similar but not the same. One is BSD license, one is CDDL license. They do effectively the same. They symbol clash, so that you cannot easily runtime link against both in the same process, which is only a problem if you need both effectively. It would be nice if libzfs didn't depend on that, or kind of embedded its own copy of stuff and gave you the handful of, basically a new symbol for the handful of nvlist operations you really need.
I see.
Again, that's not an immediate big problem for me, I found. It's just, those are quality of life improvements, just quality improvements, really, to make the code cleaner and better maintainable.
Amen.
But in a lot of ways, this is only important for third parties trying to interface with it.
Yep. Although BECTL in FreeBSD is a consumer, is it not, of at least the libzfs?
It's a consumer, and it suffers from lack of documentation, mostly, that it doesn't populate the ZFS history. Because writing to the command level human-friendly zpool history is on the libzfs user. So just because you're creating a new snapshot doesn't mean it's written to the history that's done by the ZFS command by calling the ZFS add history or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or ZFS
People
append
history.
history or something. There's
Yeah.
a function you have to call.
Oh,
Kind
okay.
of hidden out of the way because for both the ZFS and zpool commands, obviously you want to log as history the command invocation. So it's done fairly out of the way in the command code at the beginning to infer this command is one which should be logged to the history, and then just the argument list as available to the main function is logged. But for the boot environment command, you probably don't want the bectl command in the history. Okay, it would be better than nothing to have that. But what you really want is I think, the equivalent ZFS command history of effectively this bectl invocation has done the equivalent of the following ZFS commands run by hand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And perhaps some, I mean, we've got Archie, we've got Steve, we've got Andrew, I believe, attended. Any wish list items that will need some longer term discussion prior to the event to explore and flesh out?
I can't think of anything. I'm just kind of looking through this blog post that you linked.
Yes.
The one thing I'm noting is, like, I thought of is, and I'm not sure whose blog post this is. I don't remember.
That's Rob Norris.
Okay. When he mentions that one of the steps is to create a property list for the wanted properties, including the name, that actually kind of follows that the name is not a default property, because if you are explicitly specifying the options for, say, a ZFS list, you have to do name or it won't show the name. I mean, so it makes sense that name is not a property when specifying that list, just because of how it's used even on the command line.
Let him finish.
Oh, I'm done. That was just my observation.
One of the more confusing aspects is that there's a helper function which validates the nvlist. But what you get out of that validation is not usable for the operation, because the names have been mapped to IDs and the strings already converted to numbers and so on. No, you have to give the data you validated, so the original nvlist you gave into the validate function. You get an nvlist out of it, but you can't use it for the operation. You have to use the thing you gave to validate, not the validation result. Which is a bit unintuitive, but once you know that you just look if you got an nvlist back or a null pointer, if you get a non-null nvlist, you just destroy it and use the thing you just validated, then it's fine. Bit confusing from a not optimal, but mostly something which would be totally fine if documented, that this list is the result of the validation and not really useful to you as someone wanting to set a bunch of properties. Instead of having to find call sites to understand how to invoke this function because the code is a bit messy.
Is there a time that a user might be burned by the name not doing what they expect? Or is that purely when accessing the API?
No, not really.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Not on the command line level, because
the command line, the default behavior is to show that, and the if you're using -O, you probably know what you're doing.
Okay.
I mean, I use -O all the time, but I'm aware of its quirks.
To explain to the new users, I think of all here, only Michael and maybe Alex have seen what I want to show. it takes just 2 or 3 more minutes, and I can show you why I want access to this
Sure.
API.
Let her rip. Go ahead. Be quick. I need to run. Let's do that. And everyone else, please think of other topics and ideas and fun stuff.
So can you see my
Oh,
screen?
yes, it's nice and large.
So if I take this, I stop this jail. Bam. And now I go here and do ZFS destroy. The rip. I know there are better ways to do it. Bam. Okay. Ta-dam. Oh, it has dozens. So my zREPL test config went a bit amok. So it's slow right now because it has thousands of snapshots for stupid reasons. Just a consequence of a configuration error. So anyway, did it destroy all of that? Let me check. No, it didn't. Now, yeah, destroy all of your snapshots. Come on. Sorry for the slowdown. So if I now start this jail again, you can see that my automation is scripted here. Figured out that, oh, the jail exists, but I have to create a bunch of clones and create the new stuff here. Mount it all, and then it's done. And if I now go to and maybe change it to tiny. Did I stop the jail? Should I? Okay, now it's stopped. I will make my window a bit larger or the font size smaller for you. And now start it. Can see that my ZFS clone prepare hook here figured out that through a channel program that the clone must be destroyed because it's a clone of a wrong origin snapshot. Because now this jail had the small, so before the jail was from a small template, and now it's based on a tiny template, which is even smaller. So basically, the tiny one doesn't even have the main pages. And if we now take a look, mount, we can see this here. And if we do it up, we'll make the font size even smaller for you, sorry. So that it all fits more or less on one line.
Yep.
Now here we have this mount point.
UFS.
Oh, that
Old muscle
I
memory.
can't see it, and it's just
you can move that
because
little.
of the stupid.
You can move it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know. We all
Stupid little zoom and
zoomy.
reference.
Oh, I can't move it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that's about it. So I can trim down the jail down to this size.
I must run.
Each clone is just 8 kilobytes. So yeah.
Okay. Would you like to continue without me, or shall we call it good for today?
No. This is just
Anyone
a
else?
demo for why I need the
Fantastic.
create, and because then I could write it all in a channel program and it would be even faster, because right now the shell script reads the output from the ZFS program invocation and then kind of just reads lines, splits the lines at the right separators, and then invokes them as functions.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying all that. And you've gone on a perfect exercise to determine what it can look like for a user who's willing to, a consumer who's willing to put up with a whole bunch of library untangling. So points well taken. I've made the key ones red as actionable ones. Let's keep this conversation going. Thank you, everyone. I invite you to like and subscribe. I hate saying that, but hey, that's what the tubes do. And I wish you a fantastic week. Thank you, everyone.
So yeah, with this, I can provision a jail in about 500 milliseconds from a specification.
Fantastic. I love it. Okay, take care.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you.